Hi everyone. So welcome to week 2 of our class. I'm going to go through briefly here some background information, some things for week 2 to get you started, and we'll continue to have some announcements and work in our space together. So thank you so much for all your work for week 1. I know I will say the last day for ad drop is Tuesday, September 7th, I believe it is. Yeah. So make sure Tuesday, in case there's something you need to switch at your schedule, whether you're not sure about taking this class or other classes, that you can make those final switches in your schedule for the semester. So we're into week 2 here. Let me highlight our directions and notes for this week. We're really continuing with this idea of literature for exploration, and reading these accounts of early American discovery. Going off of your discussions from week 1, yeah, it's definitely interesting to read some of these perspectives that only previously we normally are reading through a history sort of lens, and then now we're taking it through the perspective of also looking at these as quote unquote works of literature. So that's one thing to think about, and certainly I've been really enjoying your perspectives of looking at the fact that yeah, we often get very distorted or romanticized or media-based images of a lot of these early sort of settlers, as particularly those who quote unquote say they discover America at this time. And we don't get many representations of the actual Native American literature. Part of this, of course, is running to the fact that we just have so little unfortunate firsthand account of what's going on at these time periods, and we are relying sort of on these primary documents, these letters, these diary entries, these reports. And so this is kind of what goes into the literature of early American discovery. And it can be a bit infuriating, but at the same time, it is also really interesting because I think the more we talk about it and discuss and look at some of these pieces, the more then we can bring a sort of realization of what actually happened and can kind of stop perpetuating different stereotypes of what we think happened or what we quote unquote keep hearing happened over and over again. Along the same times, there are a lot of authors that come into this American sort of discovery literature for exploration, and we're just again this is a survey course, so we're doing a small sampling of each author, and I'm happy to provide you with more lists or more ideas if you think you might want to go back and read some more literature of discovery. You can see here, of course, it's all dominated by mostly white men at this time period, European white men, because this is who is coming over here and who is being sent over here, more especially, is another thing to remember as we go throughout these literature. So this week, we also are going to start Puritan literature. And I am really especially excited to start this because I think there's a lot of misconceptions as well about Puritan literature. And particularly, we're starting with, I'll go down here first with Anne Bradstreet, because her work is very, very interesting, and she's one of the first women we actually encounter, and one of the only women that we get to read this Puritan kind of perspective of, especially from poetry. She herself was really apprehensive about her poetry. I have separate notes up here for her that I'll definitely share with you, but and her writing was not published, quote unquote, with much of her knowledge while she was living. But she wrote very prolifically. And I want you to think about the way, especially, she writes so openly from a Puritan perspective and belief background to her husband about her children as a writer. Again, this is just a small sampling of her work here, but it's also really important to note because there are a lot of different qualities to her writing, and we're going to be annotating her poems because I think that's some of the best ways to actually go into it, is to go right into her text and go line by line and take apart some of her really take apart some of her writing and just kind of get her own sort of feelings and your feelings on it too. We're also looking at some other firsthand accounts. We've got A Brief and True Report of the Newfoundland of Virginia, and that's by Thomas Harriot. This is interesting too, because when you go through here, I have a Padlet set up on this as well. I think it's interesting to note here the way he's describing his undertaking and his sort of voyage here as well. And I think also the way that he also uses description to go through some of what he sees and what he encounters and commodities and goods and things like that. So I like this account to look at. We also have a letter to his father and mother. I think the letters are really important to look at for these accounts because again, this is kind of all we have by Richard Fred Thorne, and I think this is another important piece to kind of consider. And then our poems by Bradstreet. We're also going to start working on your first paper. So I'm going to go back over here to our modules and collapse week 1 for a second so you can see week 2. I put some other resources. We're not going to read a lot of him right now, but Samuel de Champlain, of course, is one of the other prominent explorers at the time period, and I wanted to put some resources up here for him as well. And then we have a Padlet for this week. Your annotations. So really important to look over the notes for hypothesis. Make sure, please make sure that you're creating a little login for yourself. You're signing in, and make sure you're signed in through our class group. Very important, or you're accessing it through these links right here. And some of you have already been in here, which is awesome. So you always want to make sure your hypothesis is turned on. I myself am going to log in here and fantastic. I can see Johnny was in here, Malika was in here already. Awesome. And what you want to do is, highlight and go forth and annotate, and we'll be in discussion with each other as we go throughout these poems. So I'm really excited to start Anne Bradstreet's work with you. The other thing for this week, we do not have a ton of papers in this class. We have 2 very short papers, and this is just to kind of get us reflecting and thinking about what's going to be going on with, with the literature that we're thinking more about. So I have a very open-ended prompt here. It's not due until September 19th, but we're going to write our first work of a literary analysis, which is up to 4 pages, double spaced. You do not have to use any outside resources, but you do need to use the text, okay? You do need to use whatever it is that the reading or the readings that you're incorporating or the lines from poems. And I have a couple questions to think about here and some prompts. And you are most welcome to please read through these and please think about these prompts. You can mold them in whatever kind of shape or form you like. You can take parts of them. You're most welcome also to create a question or issue of your own choosing from the readings that we've done so far. I love when ideas come forth, so you can definitely do that. And really pay attention to, this is a really good source on writing a literary analysis. And I'm going to say this. A literary analysis is not like writing a summary of what happened in a story or a poem. A literary analysis really requires you to break down a text and to find something important that you want to question or prove or analyze to a much deeper level. And you do this by giving examples and connections that you can make with the text. So this is just a very broad example. I would never use this for a paper, but just say you're looking, you decide you really like Anne Bradstreet and you want to examine her use of a mother's perspective in poetry during the Puritan time period. Okay, very broad, but that's some place to start. You would most certainly want to use examples and lines and point out lines to the reader from her poems, maybe from the poems in class and maybe from some others you do on your own research as well, that help us understand this idea a little bit more, that help us understand the perspective, the time period. And when you're writing a literary analysis essay, you do not have to give a synopsis of every single thing that happened in a piece of literature, but rather it's bringing out the main points, it's bringing out the main objectives, it's having the solid thesis statement, it's not summarizing what happened or just showing something, but rather it is going deeper into a theme, a topic, a concern, an issue, and some of these questions. Now, some of these questions are really broad, but I thought might help you connect better to our overall course themes. And these prompts, of course, are very broad, but I thought could help you kind of branch into, a little bit more of the topics of your choosing. I will put some extra authors and things like that up here. So even if we don't have time to cover them in class, you're most welcome to include them in your writing as well. Please let me know if you'd like to meet or discuss or do anything to go over your papers as you're going to start writing that too. So I'm super excited to keep going with this week. Thank you all for your work for week one. I know week one's always super crazy, so I'm excited to really get into our content. We've got lots more digital projects and things coming up and lots of really good discussion. So I'm very excited for that.